Hey guys, welcome back, I'm Jay. In this episode, we're gonna look at the AWS CICD service, CodePipeline. AWS CodePipeline is a fully managed CICD service that helps you model, visualize, and automate release pipelines for fast and reliable application and infrastructure updates. You can quickly model and configure different phases of the software release process, such as the build, test, and deployment stages. CodePipeline automates build, test, and deployment phases of the release process, triggered by changes in your code commit or GitHub repository. CodePipeline is integrated with other AWS services, such as CodeCommit, CodeBuild, and CodeDeploy. CodePipeline works with CloudFormation for automatic infrastructure updates. It also works with third-party source control and build tools, such as GitHub and Jenkins. CICD stands for Continuous Integration and Continuous Delivery or Deployment. Continuous integration is a DevOps practice for software development, where developers merge code changes into a central repository, as often as they can. These code changes trigger automated builds and tests. Continuous delivery automatically prepares a release, ready to be deployed to different stages. However, manual approvals are still required before deploying to the next stage. Continuous delivery automates testing in parallel before a production deployment with minimum human intervention. For example, a continuous delivery pipeline automatically deploys the updates to the staging environment. However, the production releases are still triggered by the release team. Continuous deployment pipeline fully automates the release process, including the production releases without any manual approvals. Successful builds and tests automatically trigger the deployments to multiple stages. After all non-production stages are successfully deployed and tested, the software updates are deployed to production automatically. In a typical CI/CD pipeline, the development team makes many smaller code updates, and pushes changes to the code repository as often as they can. The build servers are standing by and start the build, as soon as changes are pushed to the repository. These servers are highly scalable, so that they can significantly reduce the build time from several hours down to minutes. Successful builds can trigger the automated testing process. Multiple tests are running in parallel on highly scalable testing servers. Every code change can trigger a new build, that can in turn trigger multiple tests. The automated process turns weekly builds into multiple daily builds. Potential issues that might break the build or make test fail can be picked up immediately. Smaller code updates can also mean faster bug finding and fixing. Bug fixes can immediately be built and tested. Every time after the successful build and test, a deployment-ready artifact is automatically created and ready to be deployed. Continuous delivery may still require some manual reviews and approvals. However, continuous deployment is fully automated and requires no manual approval at all. A well-implemented CI/CD workflow can improve development productivity and software quality, and reduce time to market and operational overheads. A pipeline is a workflow construct that describes how software updates should be released. Each pipeline contains a series of stages. Each stage contains a series of serial or parallel actions. You can perform these actions on the application artifacts. For example, you can have a build stage, where the source code is built and tested. The source code is an artifact in this case. You can also have a deployment stage, where you can deploy the build outputs into runtime environments. An action is a set of operations performed on application artifacts. They are configured to run in the pipeline at a specified point. For example, you can have a source action for code changes, actions for the build, test, and deployment, and actions for manual approvals. You can also use actions to invoke Lambda functions or step functions. For example, you can use Lambda function to populate data from the database for testing. Actions can run in sequence or in parallel. A transition is a point where the pipeline execution moves from one stage to another. You can disable the transition to prevent executions from entering the next stage, or enable the transition to allow executions to continue. When you have multiple executions at a disabled transition, only the latest execution can go to the next stage after the transition is enabled. For example, there might be multiple builds executed before the deployment stage, where the deployment stage is disabled. When you enable the deployment stage, only the latest build will be deployed. An artifact is a collection of application data, which can be the source code, libraries, dependencies, executables, and definition files. Each action consumes input artifacts and produces output artifacts. The output artifacts are sent to an S3 bucket. CodePipeline passes the artifacts from one action to another, using an S3 bucket as temporary storage. For example, the build action takes the source code as the input and produces an application package as the output. The application package is then passed to the deployment stage as the input. Here is an example of a typical CodePipeline workflow. We have a deployment pipeline with 5 stages, including the source, build, test, approval, and production stages. The source stage is integrated with CodeCommit. When developers push new code to the CodeCommit repository, CodePipeline automatically detects the changes. CodePipeline triggers code build to start the build process, which automatically performs the validation and runs tests. After the build succeeds, CodePipeline deploys the application to the test stage for further testing, such as integration testing and load testing. CodePipeline uses CloudFormation to create a testing infrastructure that is similar to the production environment. When the test stage is completed, CodePipeline sends a notification to the release team for manual approval. The application is ready to be released to the production environment. The approval action triggers the production deployment. CodePipeline uses CloudFormation to deploy the application and update the infrastructure. New application features are released to customers, and feedbacks are gathered. New development requests such as new features or bug fixes are sent to developers. A new development and release cycle begins. CodePipeline enables developers to rapidly update the application and release new features. In this episode, we've learned the AWS CICD service, CodePipeline. CodePipeline is a fully managed CICD service that helps you model, visualize and automate release pipelines for fast and reliable application and infrastructure updates. CodePipeline automates build, test, and deployment phases of the release process, triggered by changes in your code commit or GitHub repository. CodePipeline is integrated with other AWS services, such as CodeCommit, CodeBuild, CodeDeploy, and CloudFormation, and third-party services like GitHub and Jenkins. A pipeline is a workflow construct that describes how software updates should be released. Each pipeline contains a series of stages. Each stage contains a series of serial or parallel actions. An action is a set of operations performed on application artifacts. You can have actions run in sequence or in parallel. A transition is the point where a pipeline execution moves from one stage to another. You can disable or enable a transition. An artifact is a collection of application data, such as source code, libraries, dependencies, executables, and definition files. Each action consumes input artifacts and produces the output artifacts. CodePipeline passes the artifacts from one action to another, using an S3 bucket as temporary storage. Okay, that's all for AWS CodePipeline. Thanks for watching and see you in the next episode.
Hope you've enjoyed watching this episode. If you liked the video, please help us and hit the like button. If you want to watch more tutorials, please subscribe to the Cloudemy TV channel. Make sure to turn on the notification and stay tuned. At Cloudemy, we're passionate about cloud and AI technology. Please share your feedback and thoughts in the comments below. Feel free to let us know what topics you'd like to watch. Happy watching and happy learning.